When most people hear the word matrix, they immediately assume it's a metaphor, some kind of philosophical way to describe society, control systems, or psychological manipulation. But what we're actually talking about here is something far more literal and technical than that. The matrix is not just an idea and it's not symbolic. It's a real energetic and perceptual system that filters consciousness itself. Whether people realize it or not, every single one of us is living inside of this filter right now. What we call physical reality, the world that feels solid, fixed, and external, is not base reality. It's not the full version of existence. It's a narrowed interpretation of something much larger, almost like looking at an enormous landscape through a tiny little window and assuming that only that small portion of what you see is all that there is. The limitation is not in reality itself. The limitation is in what we are allowed to perceive. There's also known, the original matrix, sometimes called the initial field. And this is something much closer to source consciousness and much closer to how reality naturally behaves when it's not compressed or restricted. In that state, matter is not rigid. Time is not linear in the way we experience it here. And consciousness is not trapped inside a biological body, pretending it's small and separate. Instead, consciousness is primary and reality responds to it directly. In the original state, beliefs and expectations shape what manifests almost immediately. Not because it's magic, but because consciousness is literally the framework that organizes matter. So instead of feeling like you're reacting to a world outside of you, you clearly see that the world is reacting to you. This is the original nature of reality. Outside of this matrix, this is how reality works. Thought and environment are part of the same system, not two separate things. Earth itself originally functioned much closer to that condition. It was naturally what we would call in 5D, which simply means it's less compressed, less restricted, not some mystical place in the sky. Perception was wider, awareness was clearer, and beings understood themselves as creators. They did not feel cut off from reality. They did not feel powerless or dependent. They knew their thoughts had direct influence because they could see the results happening around them. Does this make sense? Okay. Then something artificial was introduced. Around 12,500 years ago, a containment system was installed around the planet. This was not something that grew naturally, not something that evolved organically, but this is an engineered frequency grid designed to compress perception and restrict awareness. This is what we now refer to as the 3D matrix. This grid acts as an energetic enclosure. It's almost like placing a dome around the planet. But the real effect was not physical walls and barriers. The real effect is perceptual. Certain ranges of frequency are simply blocked from human awareness, the same way that you could remove colors from someone's vision or silence half of the sounds that they can hear. Those frequencies did not disappear. They were just filtered out. So humanity did not lose reality. Humanity lost access to most of it. Okay? Consciousness bandwidth narrowed, memory faded, and people slowly forgot who they really were and what they were capable of. When you forget your own nature, you begin to accept whatever limitations are presented to you. And once that happens, control becomes very easy because you no longer question the cage. Inside this compressed state, reality also became easier to manipulate externally. Events could be inserted, situations could be staged, and certain experiences could be projected holographically into the collective field. This is the mandala effect. This means that not everything that appears solid and historical inside the 3D environment is necessarily organic. Some of it is part of the construct itself. At the time this grid was installed, Lyrian humans were already living on Earth, and when their perception suddenly dropped, they became confused and vulnerable. Imagine waking up one day with half your senses turned off and no memory of what you lost. That vulnerability created an opening that other groups quickly exploited. Certain reptilian factions understood and understand very well how manifestation works. They understand that reality is not random and that it follows the dominant beliefs of the population. So instead of relying only on force and warfare, they focused on something much more effective. They focused on controlling perception. They accessed technological systems connected to the moon that regulate planetary frequencies and interact directly with the manifestation process. You could describe these systems as computers, but they're really more like amplifiers between consciousness and physical reality. Through these systems, they began influencing the collective field itself, redirecting manifestation in their favor. This is what we call the Reptilian Hack. And if you scroll back a few months ago, I have a video called the Reptilian Hack. But the most important thing to understand is that the true hack was not technological. It was psychological. Because the simplest way to control a population of creators is to convince them that they're not creators at all. So humanity was taught that it is weak, limited, dependent, and powerless. People were taught that authority is always outside of them and that they must obey external structures to survive. Over time, these ideas became normal, and once a being truly believes it has no power, it stops even trying to exercise it. It's like tying an elephant to a plastic chair. The elephant is enormously strong and could walk away at any moment, but because it has been conditioned to believe it cannot, it never tests its strength. Okay, so the prison exists almost entirely in the mind. That's how the matrix really functions, not through chains or walls, but through belief systems. One of the biggest deceptions was the idea that genetics control us completely, that our biology defines our limits, and that we are trapped by our DNA. But this is backwards. See, consciousness actually shapes biology, not the other way around. The body responds to the mind. Cells respond to perception, and matter reorganizes according to awareness. So the belief that we're permanently damaged or downgraded genetically is just another layer of programming designed to make people feel helpless. At this point, those lunar systems are no longer under reptilian control. They're moderated, and monitored by the Federation forces. The strange thing is that this prison still seems to exist anyway. And that is because the prison was never primarily external. It was internal all along. The matrix automatically responds to the dominant frequency of consciousness. It mirrors what we collectively believe is possible. If humanity believes it's limited, reality in the matrix reflects limitation. If humanity expects struggle and suffering, then struggle and suffering manifest. It's the law of attraction. But if humanity remembers its creative nature, reality has no choice but to reflect that too. So liberation is not really about fighting some external enemy. It's not about waiting for rescue or technology to save us. It's about remembering who we actually are and dropping the beliefs that were never true in the first place. As fear decreases and limiting ideas dissolve, perception naturally expands. The environment reorganizes. What people call 5D is simply the natural state that becomes visible again once the filters are removed. This is the same idea in the video I talked about, what was it? Raising your frequency now. I talk about the similar things, okay? See, higher races can help stabilize frequencies and guide the process, but they cannot wake anyone up for them. Okay? That choice must come from within because consciousness itself has to reorganize itself. In the end, we were never victims and we were never powerless. We were always fragments of source consciousness playing inside of a limited system and temporarily forgetting what we really are. The only thing that ever truly limited us was the belief that we are limited. And the moment that belief dissolves, the cage dissolves with it. Because reality has always been responding to us, not controlling us. I hope you enjoyed this message. Stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching.